What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katarina. Welcome to today's episode of Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. Today, we are exploring what we can learn from a garden. How can a tree, a flower, or a green cucumber show us who we truly be? As my guide, I've invited My Södergren, who left a successful media career behind to reconnect with nature, becoming a gardener. So come along, let's discover what cultivating one's garden can create. Welcome me.
Thank you, Katarina. Thank you for having me on your beautiful podcast. I love the topic, and I'm so happy that you asked me to talk about it with you.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I got to know you quite a few years ago. I think we've been friends for nearly 20 years at this point. And when I met you, you were a producer, TV producer, you were a workshop leader, a facilitator. You trained people in media. You did a whole very big career and very multifaceted career that you were working on. And then I would say probably 7 years ago, 5-7 years ago, you started to head in another direction. So what occurred for you? What happened? And how did you end up becoming a gardener?
Yeah, I love that you asked that because, I knew the topic would be this. I've been starting to ask myself questions around it. And I hope I can be clear when I'm talking about it, because I'm not sure that I know all of it myself. But when you ask the question, I realized I have a memory of living in Stockholm, and I wanted to start gardening. But I was not allowed to do that in the place where I was living at that time. But I can recall that there was this longing getting stronger and stronger. And then after 2 years after that, I became very sick. And I met a man, a wonderful man, and I moved to his place in a small, tiny little cute town at the ocean in southwest of Sweden. And I got my first garden. I had never had a garden in my life. I've always been traveling around the world and met nature in so many ways, but I never had my own garden. That was like a turning point for me, realizing that that was kind of what I've been missing for so long, to put my hands in the soil and to get in, to interconnect with nature. To actually connect with myself through nature. So why I became a gardener was I asked my friend, I said, maybe I'm going to study something. And she said, and no, I asked her, do you know what could that be? And she said, well, of course, it's clear. You're going to be a gardener. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to be a gardener. And that's how it all started.
It's good to have friends who have clarity when
right.
So, when you said you were longing for a garden already when you were living in an apartment, and I remember my mom she loved gardening. She spent hours and hours in the garden. Also, after she got sick, she would spend so much time in the garden anytime she could. And at the time, I wasn't very interested in gardens. And I would sit beside her on a little stool and kind of do little things that she pointed, pull that or plant that there. And she looked at me, she said, there will come a time when you will get what this actually gives me. And it did. I had a similar to you, like a few years ago, I realized that I really wanted to be closer to nature. I wanted to have a garden. I wanted to be closer to the forest, to the lake, like all of that. And I moved outside Stockholm to a place that is actually right on the verge of the forest. And I have a garden now that I can be in. And for me, what it has created is like a much stronger connection with nature, a much, like you say, a connection with me. And it also has connected me to my body in a different way.
Right.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your body and the disease you had, how gardening and being with the soil and the earth has helped you.
What has been going on and what is going on in my body is a lot of pain. And when I'm in the garden, when I'm connected with the soil, with the plants, with the mycelium in the soil, it's almost like it's dissolving my reaction to it. I'm not like invested in it in the same way as when I'm not connected or interconnected with nature. And also it gives me so much trust in me that, you know, no matter what's going on, I'm me, and I'm more me now than ever before, because I don't have to have any results. And that's also something that nature taught me. Like, there are no results. It's just the choices I make when I'm creating my garden. I can't control it. That nature teaches me not to be stuck in the outcome.
Not be invested in the outcome.
Not being invested in the outcome. Yeah.
Do you ever miss what you were doing before?
Wow, that's an interesting question. No, I don't. And it was actually just like a week ago that I asked myself, okay, so because I just finished my education now, so I'm a gardener.
You're an official gardener now.
I'm an official gardener now. And I was looking at, because we're starting a project here and it's going to be some time before it starts. So I was asking myself, okay, what can I do in between? Do I want to do photographing? Do I want to do producing? What do I want to do of everything that I know? And none of it was fun anymore. And it was not scary, but it was like, wow, am I really allowing myself to choose so differently? You see what I mean?
I do. And let's talk about that, because there is a sense of freedom in that you're willing to actually see what you would like to choose. Because so many of us choose from what we presume we should be choosing, or what other people around us think we should be choosing. Yeah. And because you know all those things, why aren't you doing them? You know, all of that. So could you talk a little bit about that sense of freedom to actually choose what works for you and what you are contributed by?
Yeah, I guess again, I'm going to talk about nature, because nature has shown me how to choose that. Nature has shown me to trust my heart, to trust me, to not be right or wrong, to just in the core being me, you know, and then it's easier to choose in the moment.
Look at that. Like, there's a lot of what you were exploring before was also about, you know, to be you in different ways, in different modalities that you explored before. If you look at it, what is it with nature, with the earth, that managed to show you something that a lot of different teachers or, you know, reading books or ever haven't been able to? And I'm not saying it's better or not, like it works different for everyone, but for you, do you have a sense what that was that actually allowed you to go in and find you?
Yeah, I did not judge myself so hard anymore, because I've been really good, and I still am in many ways. I'm really, really good at judging myself. And around people, it's been tricky for me not to do that. I had so many great tools, and and it didn't land in me. I can't give you why. When I sorry.
I actually think you just did. I
Uh,
think that is a beautiful way of putting it. The earth doesn't judge.
yeah.
And, when you finally get to that place, then you don't judge yourself either.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just so beautiful. And I cry so much nowadays because everything is just there are just so many beautiful things and beautiful, people. And I watch a show on TV about regenerative gardening, and I just cry. I cry, and I cry because it's like, this is it. This is what it all boils down to, to connect with nature and to care for it. And they are doing so much research around kids now. I really, well, actually, that's one of the things I still want to do. I want to work with kids and youths, and I want to give this knowledge to them. So that's the project that I'm working on, actually.
So what is your idea of how to work with kids and nature and gardening
Yeah.
and the earth?
Yeah. If kids get to be with nature, if kids get to know nature, they will care for it, and they will care for themselves. And if we look at what's going on around us right now with kids, I think it's crucial for them to connect with something that doesn't judge, and to really get trust in themselves. So I was asked to start a project for kids, where they are going to meet nature through gardening, and it's going to be a lot of playing around worms and soil, and what happens when you put a seed in the soil, and to really see life becoming, and also to talk about what happens in them, to have conversations around what happens in them when they see this seed become alive and become like a big tree, or a big flower, or a cucumber that you can eat, and for them to reconnect and be grateful for and curious about life, and how we can create it together.
And life in a much bigger sense, right? Because we talk about life as our own lives, life, and here I'm born, and then I do this, and then I die. But life, the way it sounds like you're talking about it, is life as its own life everywhere, life in a leaf, life in a flower, life in us, life in that circle of life, actually, that goes on.
Yeah, exactly.
That's beautiful. And it reminds me of this. Before we started this podcast, I was telling you that I'm spending the winter in South Africa because I'm not that keen on Swedish winters. It's dark and cold. And I'm also really aware of how much the seasons actually is part of what we just talked about, the circle of life. So would you be able to talk a little bit about how you see now, when you are living much closer with nature, when you're living with your garden who develops, how you see the different seasons? Because Sweden really has 4 distinct seasons. So we're very lucky that way. So how has that changed for you now when you live in that symbiosis with actually how the earth moves around the sun?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, for example, the snow, many people say, oh my God, it's going to be so cold. It's a lot of snow and da-da-da. But if you look at the plants, it's really great that the snow is coming, because it gives them a protection, like a layer of warmth, actually.
Like a blanket.
Yeah, like a blanket of snow. So for nature, snow is great, and when it becomes really cold, as it can be here in Sweden, if there is snow, a blanket of snow, it takes care of itself much better. It doesn't freeze to death, so I've always loved the snow, but now it got a greater value now, not just for me to enjoy, but I also seeing how it contributes to the whole wheel of life.
Well, and there is such a beauty to that continuous change too, like how every season goes into the next, and like how things have to die for something new to come.
Yeah,
So
that too. Exactly. Yeah.
Over the years, I've become more and more fascinated by nature's absolute brilliance. And I was reminded to that when you said about the snow, that actually creates this warm blanket and takes care of the buds and everything under the earth, so it can come up at spring. But I've been out and doing bush drives here in South Africa and in the savannah. And every time I go out, I hear about like something, I had no idea what's going on. So you see things with your eyes, but you only perceive a fraction of the wondrous of nature. So we were looking at this termite mound, and the guide said, look, under here, hundreds of meters of you only see like tip of the iceberg. That's a termite mite you see. And under there are like hundreds of meters of termites. And then he explained this whole way how the termites worked and how other animals, and like how it literally is such a big part of the whole system. And the queen lives for 50 years. She never leaves. She spreads her orders with her saliva that comes in. But look at that, like how amazing that was. And even my description of that is like so small compared to what actually goes on in a termite mound. They're like essential for how things go. And that's the same, what we have all over the world that just happen to be here. And that for me is like when we look at, we see so little because we don't know yet. And the more you know, the more miraculous nature seems.
Yes. There is this movie called The Big Little Farm, and it's an existing farm called the Apricot Lane Farm, I think. And that movie, I really recommend everybody to see it. It's about a couple that goes to California. They buy land. The soil is not even soil; it's more like dust. It doesn't have any nutritions in it whatsoever. And in the beginning, they try to, let's say there is a wild animal coming in and eating some hens, and they become, okay, we gotta kill that wild animal to save the hens. And a lot of things like this are happening. There are animals coming to eat all the fruit. There are rats coming to destroy the trees and all of these things. And then year 7, they realize that everything is required to have a regenerative farm, to have a regenerative communion with earth, and it's so beautiful because not everything could be there, even the animals that ate the fruit, because when it was all a balance, everything worked together and took care of each other. So it's almost like the more we try to control earth, the worse result we get. Because if we just trust it, it will take care of itself. And hasn't that got to do with ourselves too? The less we try to control ourselves and trust ourselves, the more in harmony with ourselves we will be.
And it is such a beautiful awareness also for living, because it goes so much into our lives too. We keep trying to control everything to turn out the way we decided it should turn out, right? We can plant a seed and then we'll see if it comes up. It depends a bit. Maybe a worm ate it and then it won't come up. I don't know if worms eat seeds, but whatever. There is a sense of we can do this in living too. We can not control it, not be invested in the outcome. Yes, we can plant a seed and then we'll see where that goes. So that allowance and that relaxation of living, that's beautiful. So I wanted to finish by asking you one question. Let's see if that works. What has been like the most surprising thing that you've learned since you started to be a gardener?
It surprised me how it's like to be me when I'm relaxed and have trust in me.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. That
And
is
I'm almost crying.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. And we'll put the link to that movie that you mentioned also so people can watch that. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit katarinavalentin.com/wolf.